ready, Mr. Kessler? Okay. We're going to call the Central York School Board March 9th meeting, planning meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Gemma? Gothy? Grothy? Guth? Johnson? King? Lewis? Speed? Wagner? Here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along, we're going to start with our administrative reports. We have Mr. Kaufman here from the high school.
Good evening. I'd like to share a few things from the high school with you. On Wednesday, March 4th, Eva Bumstead, a 12th grader, spoke at a youth panel for the Future Leaders of York Leadership Training Program. The director contacted me, indicated that her presentation and leadership skills were amazing and that she did such a fabulous job. So I wanted to thank Eva for her hard work and representing Central in such a wonderful way. It's a great organization. Additionally, Central Powerlifting team, coached by Mr. Lang, did an amazing job at their first meet at Parkland High School in Allentown the end of February. Our boys took second place, and our girls took third place overall. And Mr. Lang said additionally, many of the lifters had their personal bests during that day. So it's not a normal high school sport, but we have a lot of kids that are going out and doing this, and they should be commended for all that extra work. So they did a great job. Scheduling is well underway for the 2021 school year. We are currently building the master schedule based off of the number of sections that everybody has requested. This is you'd think it was a science, but it's somewhat of an art, trying to play this out and figure out all of the different courses, how many sections, and so forth. But I wanted to mention that Dr. Zarnecki and Mrs. Fischel are doing an amazing job. It's an all-encompassing, time-consuming effort, and they are just doing great. We are on track for our normal second round for the scheduling, which will be beginning to mid-April, where the students will then be able to go back in and pick their courses by semester, by block of the day. So we are well underway and right on track for our spring scheduling. From the JROTC program, on Friday, March 20th, the JROTC program will hold their annual military ball. They are expecting over 200 people to attend again this year. And this is an entirely planned, organized, and run event by the JROTC cadets. And it's always amazing. Additionally, the food will again be prepared by our Culinary 3 learners and served by our National Honor Society kids. So this is a whole school effort for an amazing event, and that's not this coming Friday, but next Friday the 20th. So we're looking forward. I always enjoy going to that. Additionally, Major Sergeant last week attended, and you have to think about that, but his last name is Sergeant, so Major Sergeant, sorry. It always confuses me for a second. Attended the NRA dinner, accepting a grant of $9,200 for our Air Force JROTC marksmanship program. So that was an awesome piece for our marksmanship program. Additionally, Major and Chief wanted to recognize that Desiree George and Coley Bagwell were selected for full Army ROTC scholarships to the Valley Forge Military Academy, so that's awesome. And additionally, Alton Moon has received an Army ROTC scholarship to VMI. So already on our way, and that's I'm sure we will continue to get more of those in as the spring goes on, because that's actually pretty early for these folks, so that's awesome. From Mr. Martini, the Central York Performing Arts Department presented Mary Poppins on March 6th to 8th. About 3,000 audience members in attendance over the 3 days. There were over 100 Central York High School students and staff, and actually some elementary students that participated. And it was a monumental production. So those that had, hopefully you had a chance to go. I actually wrote a couple of notes to some of the cast members because I said, quite possibly in my, 13 years here, 14? I've lost track. Quite possibly one of the best productions that I've seen. And it was massive with all the sets and everything. Mary Poppins flying through the air. It was great. So my one son looked at me and said, "How does she do that?" I didn't want to ruin it for him. So wonderful performance. Additionally, he said the high school, once again, has a tremendous representation at the PMEA Festival. Moving on from regional to the regional, level, Abigail Wobber and Andy Milston and Pratal Prabhu to Regional 5 Band, which is awesome. And then Abigail Wobber also made it for the Regional Orchestra, so that is a tremendous success for them. Additionally, the high school choir and orchestra will present a pre-tour concert on Tuesday, March 10th at 7:30. And the high school band, along with the middle school band, will present a concert together on Wednesday, March 18th. So a couple of different things coming up from our music groups. And then from Mr. Lambert, Aiden Frazier, one of our juniors, was selected from the region qualifying level to participate in the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association All-State Honors Choir. Aiden had to rank in the top 6 in his voice part among 30 extremely skilled musicians. So congratulations to Aiden for making the All-State Conference. That's awesome, and that will be in April in the Poconos. And finally, from Mr. Trimmer, from wrestling, Mason Myers qualified for states. That was this past weekend, and he wrestled well. He made the medal round and finished 8th in the 132-pound weight class. We're having great success with our sports teams this winter. Boys basketball won the league championship, finished 3rd in the district, won their first state game beating Pittsburgh Central Catholic 60-39, and will now play Wednesday against McDowell. The girls basketball team lost in a close one for the district finals by 4 to Central Dauphin, and then won their first round of states, beating Methacton, if I pronounced that right, 51-49 in a last-second shot to win the game. They will now play Tuesday against Central Bucks East. And I saw something from Coach Sheeler that said we were I think only one of 2 high schools in the state of Pennsylvania right now that have both their boys and girls basketball teams still in the state tournament. And then for boys and girls swimming, we'll send 6 swimmers to states, and it starts tomorrow, I believe, which is awesome, and they had a great showing at districts. The 6 swimmers include Cameron Speed, Cameron Leidig, Sydney Ulmer, Gabby Miller, Molly Kleindinst, and Ava Gemma. We wish them all the best as they move on to states this week. So I'm sure I'll have even more things to celebrate next board meeting. So we wish everybody great success, and pending your questions, that completes my report for tonight.
We discussed this weekend about when you do your courses, when you're listing them, it'd be good if you could say that if they were offered in the in-house cyber school or I don't know if we've gotten that down to him yet or not, as far as listing the course, so that the learners will be able to know whether or not they can take that as a traditional course, or if they can take it online through our sources, or if it would be through the Odysseyware.
Okay.
So.
All right, just so you know, Odysseyware courses are not in the course guide and are not actually on the course selection sheet. So when they go to register for courses, they actually can't select an Odysseyware course. That would be an after the fact, if they go back to their counselor and say, I don't want this course, I would like an Odysseyware online course.
Which was part of the thing when we brought up, how are we marketing as far as what things are available online, especially the in-house online stuff that's cheaper to go through versus Odysseyware? How would I even know the Odysseyware as far as we should have some way to be able to track that a person says, well, I might be able to do this other course. I mean, instead of going all cyber, that we try to keep them in the school, but show them that they can take other courses. We have any way to do that as far as?
Yeah, so what the counselors typically do is, one, they try to focus the kids towards our online courses first because we have control of that. It's the same curriculum as the traditional course. So they really try to market those first. And then if we have a student, it's usually not the student, it's usually the parent. For some extenuating circumstance, they want their child to take an OdysseyWare course because potentially it's an online course that we don't have through one of our regular courses. And then there is a document that the counselors give to the parents, that all the OdysseyWare courses that they can take through the academy. So at that point, when the parent says, no, I really want an OdysseyWare Academy course, they have a brochure that they can give to the parent that they can see what the courses are and select what's appropriate for their child. And I can get a copy of that if that's something.
I just want to make sure that people are aware that the in-house cyber is available, and because I didn't know how much was available as a parent, so it's just nice to know, especially if you can do the same course that is being taught in the classroom with the same teacher kind of thing.
Absolutely, yeah, and in our course selection guide, all the courses that are an online course that our teachers built, there's a flag above it. It will say online or self-paced or Apollo, and then in the course description, there's a line that will say, I'm trying to think the title of it, I think it might just say, I forget exactly, I'd be lying. So there's a title, and then it will also say traditional online self-pay, whatever it's provided as in that line. No problem.
Can you tell us how many kids are doing the OdysseyWare this semester? I mean, is that something that you can get for us?
Yeah, I can get you the exact number. I want to say I was having this conversation with Mrs. Kornbauer, who runs it. As of I want to say 3 weeks ago, I think when we were talking, it was about 190 kids. Now, I want to say about 70 to 80 of those are full cyber kids, so everything is cyber, and then the rest make up the blended, where they're taking most of their classes at the high school might have one course in OdysseyWare or two courses, but I can get you the exact numbers.
Okay, and then on Skyward, when you can see what classes they're taking, if someone is taking an OdysseyWare class, it doesn't show up that you can see their progress
In where?
in Skyward. So even Marty Trimmer can't see that they're signed up for OdysseyWare. Like if their grades were to drop or if there was something, he can't even see that, for athletics.
Right, so Mrs. Kornbauer is the counselor that oversees OdysseyWare. She does something similar like that the teachers do. She runs a eligibility report for Mr. Trimmer that provides the grades for those kids that are in the high school. Because over my years here, I don't think the students. I don't think I can remember any students that were fully cyber that participated in any events.
Right.
So she runs an eligibility piece to manage that aspect of it. So, but there's a whole different world to that OdysseyWare piece when it comes to attendance, requirements, so on and so forth.
So how can a parent see their progress? Do they check in with Mrs. Kornbauer or?
So Mrs. Kornbauer sends out a report to the parents, like a progress report. That's what it's called, a progress report, that the parents get routinely through the system. The parents have the same access. They can get onto OdysseyWare and check their child's progress. And then if the child isn't, each child has to register X number, I can get that number for you too, X number of hours on the system a week, and she can see all that. And when they don't hit that number, it becomes an attendance issue. So we have a process of saying if you're not hitting X number of hours per week,
Right.
then it's like you're skipping class basically, and then that gets into an attendance piece that then she also monitors through our truancy task force.
Okay,
So.
right, thank you.
Yep.
Maybe you said, but The young man, I think you said, that's gone to the All-Star Music, what instrument
Yeah.
does he play?
Oh, that's choir. That's, so he's a singer.
Oh, it's choir.
Yeah,
Okay,
Aiden
yeah.
Frazier. Yep. Yep, no problem, I'm sorry.
Anyone else? And by the way, we're going to do a little wrap-up from the weekend retreat, and we'll come back and take all of the data we collect and the information and the comments from the weekend that we had on Saturday and sort of come up with a plan of action if there's something that we feel needs to be addressed a little bit more. Odyssey Ware was a conversation we had quite a bit about, and so we'll be in touch and let you know once we wrap all that stuff up together again. And if we have something we need to address with Mr. Kaufman, we will. Okay? Okay. Dr. Harper from the middle school.
Good evening. Later this week, several middle schoolers from the Central York Middle School Avidum Club will attend the second ever statewide Rock Avidum Conference in Lidditz. This conference is designed to engage Avidum members, provide critical mental health and suicide prevention training, empower students to use their gifts and talents to create change, share ideas and best practices, and energize participants to continue to implement the Avidum movement within their schools and communities. And so earlier this year, you saw, some of you might not have been here when we did this, I can't remember, a video presentation about a postcard, about postcards that we have at the middle school, and so that's also going to be shared out again at the statewide conference. That has been shared on several platforms, but it will also give an opportunity for our learners to learn some new things from other schools as well. The last time I shared a report with you, I talked about how well our learners did at the York County level math counts, and I would like to congratulate our math counts team. They traveled to Millersville University on Saturday, February 22nd, to compete in the York, Adams, Lancaster, and Lebanon chapter competition. In total, there were 29 schools with 178 middle schoolers who participated. The middle school team of Mark Souter, Austin Strickler, Ethan Rower, and Wang Win placed 5th in the team round. Individually, Mark Souter placed 4th after the written rounds, which earned him a spot on the countdown round. After competing against the top 10 mathletes, Mark placed 3rd overall. This qualifies him to compete in the state competition, which will be held this Friday and Saturday in Harrisburg. 5 other Central York students placed in the top 25. Ethan Rower was 24th, Andrew Gao, 23rd, Austin Strickler, 19th, Wang Win, 18th, and Matthew Chen was 12th. So congratulations to all of our mathletes, and as well as Miss Haynes and Miss Beck. They are wonderful leaders for our Math Counts team. Excuse me. And continuing on our responsive classroom journey at the middle school, this Friday is a half day for learners, and half of our staff at the middle school are actually going to be going through a full day introductory workshop for the responsive classroom. So the purpose of this full day workshop is to introduce our teachers to the essential practices of responsive classroom. I previously shared out that we have been doing a book study this year, and so this will complement that. We also had, including myself, there were 5 staff members over the summer who attended a 4-day intensive workshop. The second half of our staff will be trained in the fall. So since we do have a half day on Friday and half of our staff will be in training, we are following an alternate schedule that does include a presentation that is funded through a grant called Road Radio USA, and our learners for part of the morning will get to listen to a speaker discuss things like drug and alcohol use and making good choices, even starting at the middle school age. The rest of the staff in the half day will be participating in a data day, looking at various points of data from classrooms to teams to the whole building. And the half of the staff who does not participate in the responsive classroom training on Friday will receive that training in the fall. And this is, the training that's occurring is with a trainer directly from Responsive Classroom. So pending any questions, that concludes my report.
What's a responsive classroom? I might be
Sure.
here.
So I can get you more information, but responsive classroom is a philosophy that many school districts across the country ascribe to, and our district has actually used responsive classroom K through 6 for about the last 20 years. So it's a philosophy that talks about teacher language, student discipline, interactive learning structures, all of the ancillary pieces that make up school, talking about, the developmental stages that our learners go through and developmentally appropriate practice. So several years ago, responsive classroom actually expanded to the middle school level. And so we started the responsive classroom journey at the middle school last school year. In the middle of the year, we started talking about it. And then over the summer and throughout the school year, we've been able to provide more training. Sure.
Just one question. Are any of these things taught at the teacher college level when they're training to be teachers? Or is this something that's outside of the norm that's taught in the
It really,
program?
yeah, it really depends on where you go, what you do and don't get. Responsive classroom is really rooted in, best developmental practices, and we hope that all colleges are ascribing to that. But it does go more in depth with more detailed, daily experiences that you would have in a classroom versus when you are in your college setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening to everybody. So in the K-3, we'll start K-3. K-3 participated this last week in Read Across America. So that's a love of reading in our K-3 buildings and lots of appreciation of books. So at Stony Brook, the staff and the children kicked off a whole school book read. So they are reading How to Eat Fried Worms. And they had over 200 attend their family night, and they made worm pudding, and they participated in their own compost with live worms and a scavenger hunt, and they all received their own book. So every family has their own book for how to eat fried worms. They're able to access some story reading in the evenings, and they're also answering trivia questions. And everyone wants to know, will they find out if the main character, Billy, eats all 15 worms to win $50? So that's Stony Brook. Around town in Hayshire, we also were busy with Read Across America activities. We had our Spirit Days, so we had Crazy Socks and Wacky Wednesday and Green Eggs and Hams Green Day, and then the highlight was dressing as a book character and showing your appreciation of reading, and everyone dressed, adults, kids, in their book characters. And the Hayshire students, the reading buddies, and these are some children that actually act as peer mentors with other children. They presented the Dr. Seuss Assembly at the start of the week. So that was fun to see them do that. At North Hills, Mrs. Koplitz and Mrs. Stewart's sixth grade classrooms presented their Apollo Junior projects. The concept is a junior version of the Apollo classrooms at the high school, and they have spent some time with the teachers to learn some of the structures and be able to acquire some of the information that the teachers at the high school have used. And then they help their learners at the sixth grade with that structure. And the sixth graders researched a project of their own choice, and then they incorporated the reading, writing, and scientific skills into various projects: volcanic activity, force and motion, study of planets, and then, of course, they had models and keynote presentations, trifold, screencasts, all types of things, and I heard it was pretty awesome. Yeah, that's what I was hearing. So throughout the month of February, Sinking Springs celebrated Kindness Month. So their children were able to be part of the announcements on the loudspeaker, and the Spirit Council read kindness tips, and the morning meetings focused on activities around kindness activities. Some vertical teams completed things like the SPCA collection. They decorated the classroom doors with the theme of kindness. And then just an update on Eamon Riley. He had the Mars rover name, suggestion of tenacity. They didn't go with that at NASA. They went with perseverance. Yeah. But the experience for our student, our learner, was awesome from what I heard, and quite a lifetime experience. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. It's all very good. I have 3 items to share this evening, and I'd like to introduce or ask Mr. Kaufman to come back up to the microphone. I have 3 items, the first being Act 158, statewide high school graduation requirements impacting the graduating class of 2022. Mr. Kaufman will discuss the act and its impact upon learners in the school district. So before he proceeds, at your desktop, you have a PowerPoint, which Mr. Kessler will project behind us. Underneath that, you have a document that we've created to track the different pathways and the multitude of learners going through, somewhere around 400 learners. What's a graduating class currently?
For this current sophomore class, I want to say is around 450.
450. And then the actual act is there, so that when you leave here tonight, if you choose to refer to any of those documents, you can continue to reflect and get us any questions that you may have. So at this point in time, Mr. Kaufman, would you take us through the presentation?
Sure. So if you take a look at the second slide there, the actual law was signed into action in 2018. However, they've still been building out Act 158, figuring it out. To this date, you'll hear me say a couple of times in here that PDE still hasn't provided some of the information that is required in order to track some of this. Interesting, I sat on a webinar that actually went way longer than anybody ever wanted to hear about this, for about 2.5 hours. In one of the things that I found very interesting was they admit that the reason why they put this Act 158 into place is because the original law stated that all students, in order to graduate, had to be proficient or advanced on all 3 keystones. And they admit that at the current rate, that would hit about only 51% of the population in Pennsylvania. Thus, 49% of all students wouldn't have graduated high school. So basically, through that, they did say that this is going to start with the class of 2022, which is our current sophomores. They are still required to take the Keystone. So the federal mandate that the Keystones revolve around is still in place, and students are still required to take the Keystone exams. But the big key here is that learners don't have to be proficient in all of the keystones in order to graduate. A couple other pieces that go into the background too that I think is significant is the superintendent still has the 5% waiver. So 5% of the graduating class, and they said it's a local decision, the superintendent can waive this requirement for it. They said really what they're looking at are students with some serious illnesses, family issues, tragedies in the family emergencies. And then the other one is seniors moving or transferring within their senior year, which, especially if you're traveling from outside of the state in the state, this is going to be very difficult for them to do, which I will explain in more detail. Additionally, the IEP concept, where a learner can graduate on their IEP goals, which is an IEP team decision, there's no number set to that. So if the IEP team says, here are the requirements that this child needs in order to graduate, which they've been doing for years and years and years, that overrides Act 158 and thus there is no set number on that.
Mr. Kaufman, IEP stands for, just for the community.
Individual
and the board.
education plan. So those are our learners with learning disabilities. So that's a positive there, that their IEP teams still make the decisions on how those learners are going to graduate. Next slide. So really there are 5 options that are pathways that they lay out in terms of being able to meet the new Act 158 requirement. The first one, very simple. You're proficient or advanced on all 3 keystones. Boom, you satisfy the requirement, and you're good to go. Now they also mentioned that the local requirement is still a requirement. Just because you pass the 3 keystone exams doesn't supersede any local requirements that are set by the school district. So we have some other graduation requirements like 28 credits to graduate, so on and so forth, that just because they pass 3 keystones doesn't mean that it supersedes whatever the local entity has set. So that's the first one, pretty simple. The next one starts to get a little more complicated. So this is the composite score. This is the one score that they have provided us to this point. I will mention that they did mention that all these were supposed to be, if you read the one document, provided to us back in August. But we didn't have anything in August, but they now provided this one, 4452. So they give a little wiggle room. A proficient score is 1,500. So, that would be 4,500 for 3 proficient tests. So basically what the composite score allows you to do is take the whole number of your 3 keystones, and if it's greater than 4452, you've satisfied the requirement. You cannot get lower than a basic, though. So if you get a below basic, option 2 is off the table for you. So basic, proficient, or advanced, depending upon how you do, you could score very high, advanced in your English, but you struggle in math, and you get a basic. You do okay in bio, and it evens out to, you get up to a 4452, and you've satisfied the requirement. So there's tons of different examples, but just kind of think in your head of all the different ways that you can meet that number between the 3 tests, and you're good to go. The one key piece here, though, is that this is only for the 3 keystone exams. So if you are a transfer student from outside of the state of Pennsylvania and you've already satisfied your, let's say, algebra requirement through whatever test it is from another state, you're not eligible for this option. So this was off the table. You have to take all 3 keystones. So it's just another piece, as you'll see it when we talk a little bit later, of a concern of how we have to track this overall concept. Now we start getting interesting. Alternate pathway, option 3, really starts to get into the idea now that you didn't have to pass or be proficient or advanced in any of the keystones. So if you don't hit the composite score, whatever you had, below basic, basic, proficiency, whatever the combination, then you run into option 3. So the first piece, which is kind of wordy, but basically means the locally established grade-based requirement is passing the course. So you have to pass algebra, biology, and for us it's English 10. So that's the locally established grade-based requirement. Then, so that's the must, which we require all of our kids to do that anyway. The next piece then is you have to provide one of the following pieces of evidence. So, and you can see what's listed there. The cut scores, this is one of the things they have not provided to us yet. We have no idea what the cut scores are going to be for SAT, PSAT, ACT, ASVAB, and AP. I think we've talked about these before. PSAT is the practice SAT. The ACT is the alternate to the SAT. The ASVAB is the Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Battery. They did mention that they're shooting for a score of 31 on that to be the cut score. Right now, our high school average is 41. So I will tell you, most of our kids that take the ASVAB far exceed 31. And then AP, Advanced Placement, if they take an AP test, say they take the end of course AP World History, there's a cut score, you get above the cut score, that could be your piece of evidence. The ACT Work Keys assessment, we actually don't provide that. but it's actually an assessment tool for those kids that are interested in going in straight into employment. And really, it's employers that are that have an emphasis on the National Career Readiness Certification. So that's another avenue, but we actually don't offer that at this point. Successful completion of a pre-apprenticeship program. So we have one pre-apprenticeship program through the independent electrical contractors. We are in the process, so they make everything difficult. So your pre-apprenticeship program has to be approved by the state of Pennsylvania through Labor and Industry. So we have an awesome pre-apprenticeship program. Currently, it's not approved by Labor and Industry. We never went through that, didn't actually really realize we needed to do that. So now, Ellie Lamison was just telling me that the IEC, the Independent Electrical Contractor, is working with Labor and Industry to get it approved at this point in time, and we should have that by the end of the year. And then acceptance in an accredited four-year college. That one should put off flashing red lights to you because the high school doesn't track that. We don't get acceptance letters. So as we started talking about this with our families, one of the things that I said to our families at a couple of different points, especially I talked about this at the scheduling night, is that we have to establish a great relationship with our families because they are going to be the ones that have to provide us this documentation if this is their piece of evidence that they want to use, because we don't get acceptance letters from colleges. So that's just another thing that makes this process even a little bit more difficult. So we'll work on that. The other piece is some kids don't get their acceptance letters until late May. That's real close to graduation. So we'll be tracking that one closely. So that's option 3. Option 4, as they describe the difference between 3 and 4 is 3 is your kids that are looking at going on to a 4-year college. Option 4 are really your kids that want to go into a work-based environment, trade school, 2-year college, so on and so forth. So here it starts off the same way, successful completion of those locally grade-based requirements, which is passing the class. And then they have, unfortunately, more hoops to jump through. The way they describe this is 1 of the top within that first section and 2 from the second section. However, they did mention during this webinar that if you had 2 from the first, that second one from the first can count as one of them from the bottom section, so and so. So basically, it's a smorgasbord. You know, go in, pick what you choose, and as long as it works out to 3, you'll be okay. So you can see the pieces there. I won't read them all to you. One that catches people up, though, is the second bullet under one of the following, which is acceptance in an accredited other than 4-year college. Everybody reads that and says, well, that was what the last one was. This is other than 4-year college. So you're talking a 2-year trade school, so on and so forth. But it has to be a nonprofit organization, which most of our kids go to, like Stevens College, some of those types of things. They're nonprofit organizations. So it just throws in another wrinkle. Industry recognized credential, once again, that's always fun because it has to be an industry recognized credential that PDE has approved, and they have a list of them that we have and we're looking at. I will say ServSafe is one of them, which we do offer that one, so that's positive. And then in the bottom list there's a whole bunch of them. One of them that a question came up regularly was about the NCAA piece of it. So a student that wants to use that as one of their pieces of evidence, it's the NCAA school that they choose to go to, not just a standard Division I or standard Division II, whatever the NCAA requires for the specific school that they want to go to, which, you know, that's actually better for our students. So, and then they can also, like a student that just wants to go into employment, a letter guaranteeing full-time employment is also a piece of evidence. I was somewhat disappointed, though. They really could care less what employment they're going into. They basically said that. It's a matter of how many hours do you have? Do you have the 30 hours that generates a full-time employment? And they spent more time talking about the format of the letter. Did you have the employer's address and all that kind of stuff along with the child's? Whereas, you know, we asked a couple of questions about, you know, because we want to focus kids on career type of employment post-high school, not just do they have a job. So That was a little bit unfortunate, but it's one of the options that we can get the kids. So that's option 4. And then option 5 really doesn't pertain to the high school. This is really for career and technical education. So it's important to us because we have quite a few learners that go over to York County School of Technology. So understanding what they need in order to meet their criteria for this. Though York County School of Technology will actually track this for those learners. But we will keep an eye on this, especially for our learners that may come back to us, what we can use and so forth. The next slide talks a little bit about how we're communicating this. So starting in January with the freshman and sophomore class meetings, Dr. Zarnecki went over this in pretty decent detail with those learners so that they get the first blush of what it is that's required of them. I went over this in my principal parent advisory meeting in January with the parents. We went into great detail through this and had a really good discussion behind it. In February, I worked with all the subject area facilitators because one of the pieces that we want to have with this is it's not just the counselors that are responsible or the kids that are responsible, but we want our central learning coaches, that's the advisor teachers that all the kids have, to be going over this with the kids periodically as well, making sure that they're thinking about it on a more regular basis. So we talked it through with our subject area facilitators, and then actually Dr. Zarnecki and I went into almost every department. Their department heads asked us to come in and kind of go through this with all their teachers. So that was very good and had some good discussion. We went over this in great detail with the counselors and a tracking form that's in your in the packet documents that you have. It's our initial blush at how we may track this for the individual learner. We talked about it at the course selection night back in February with all the parents that were there. Obviously, we're presenting tonight, and then the next step is to advertise this on our website, on the high school page. Dr. Zarnecki and I are going to do a little video going through the slides, discussing it, and we'll put that up on the website with the slide deck so that any parent at any point in time can view it, and then we'll keep coming back at it as we continue down into the next few years. The next piece, Mrs. Guth has asked us a couple of times, what are those challenges? What are the concerns that you have out there? So we put a slide in here to kind of go over that. The first one, which was echoed on this webinar that I was on probably 50 times, was there's some great concern from, some superintendents on there, assistant superintendents, building principals, and even teachers, is the potential for Keystone scores to drop. Because kids are going to realize pretty quickly, I don't need the Keystones. And it's actually not the easiest path to completion of the state requirements. Actually, option 3 is, if you pass your classes and you're going to go to college, boom, I'm done. I don't have to even worry about these Keystone exams anymore. So there was a lot of emphasis placed on that, which it's a concern. Will kids take it seriously? Now PDE said, well, every kid still has to take it, so they'll take it seriously. We'll see as we go.
I'm sorry, I can't listen to this with a straight face anymore. This is so ridiculous. It's not your fault.
I know.
I'm just the messenger, I swear to God. This is horribly ridiculous. I'll continue.
Okay.
Let's get to the end.
So that's a concern. The tracking of learners' path is a concern. So the interesting piece is this is not a PIMS reportable law. It will not go into PIMS. And they actually don't want a by individual name report. All they want is an aggregate. How many kids are graduating on option 1, how many are graduating on option 2, how many on 3, and so forth. That's all that they said about. The other piece of concern that I personally asked was the idea of evidence. Because I'm thinking, how are we going to store all this evidence for all these kids for a few years until we get audited? They said, you don't. When the kid graduates, you can get rid of all the evidence. They don't want it. They're not going to come back and ask you for evidence 2 years down the road. So we're going to go by that. So that's the tracking piece. I already talked about the coordination with parent and guardians. The big one is going to be a tough one for those learners transferring, whether it's in their senior, especially in their senior year, and that's where, you know, through the counselors, through me, I may have to go to Dr. Snell and request a waiver if there's just no possible way for one of our learners that is supposed to be graduating if they can't meet something along that line. And then we're still waiting on benchmarks. So our sophomores will be juniors next year, and we still actually can't go back to them and say, hey, these are the things that you need. Here are the cut scores that you need in order to be tracking for yourself. So that's another piece. And then ensuring appropriate amount of time. So for some learners, this is going to be a fairly lengthy process. You know, they may be a option 4 student that needs 3 pieces of evidence out of there, and making sure that our counselors and our CLC teachers provide enough time individually with the learner to make sure that they're comfortable with what they need to do. So that's just the last one on there. And then finally, the next steps, we're going to continue to advertise. We will receive the cut scores at some point, which we will also disseminate the information. Like I said, we're building out this tracking mechanism. Now, PDE said that they are building a toolkit that's supposed to help districts in tracking and working with this. But at this point, we're really looking at probably a detailed spreadsheet, because we're going to need something that you can sort and be able to glean different reports from at a fairly regular basis. And right now, we don't have a mechanism that can. We have ones that can do pieces of this, like Skyward with all the Keystone scores and so forth, but there's not a mechanism to put all that other information in there, like those pieces of evidence and so forth. So we're looking at ways to do that. We're going to continue to provide that professional development that our teachers need and our central learning coaches need. And then we're going to finalize, once we clearly understand through Mr. Grove's office, that report process. What does it need to look like, and what exactly are we reporting back to PDE to make sure that we satisfy the requirements? Pending your questions.
I am so sorry that you had to listen to all that, and I'm more sorry that our staff have to track all this. This is clearly an example of a classic educational reform mandated by the legislature, where they're going to offer no funding but require all this accountability, and then mandate all these changes when they realize at the last day that they are not going to have all the kids graduate, and they don't want to have a riot of all the parents in Pennsylvania that they're going to have when 49% of the kids don't graduate. This is truly the William J. Lepetomane evisceration of standards. He's the governor from Blazing Saddles, and he said famously, and I will redact this somewhat, we have to do something to keep our ridiculous jobs. This is appalling. It's absolutely appalling. And like I said, the real crime here is that our people have to track this. On my to-do list for tomorrow is to write a letter to our 2 legislators to ask them to repeal this in its entirety. It's cowardly, it's ridiculous, it's meaningless. There's clearly somebody at the Department of Education sat down and decided, okay, we can't possibly have 51% of our kids graduating and 49% of our kids not graduating. Let's come up with as many possible ways to make sure that they all graduate so nobody comes and screams at us. You don't need to offer any opinion on this. It is what it is. But this is classic. It's absurd. It is Kafkaesque in its ridiculousness. Thank you.
I just making sure I kind of understand this, but Keystones are at the end of your junior year, right?
It's
That
the end of
make or break.
End of course. So if whenever you take Algebra 1, you take at the end of that course you take the Algebra Keystone. So some of our learners take that in 8th grade, many in 9th grade. We do have a few 10th graders every once in a while that are finishing up Algebra 1. English, English Keystone is taken at the end of their 10th grade year, and Bio is an 11th grade course for our learners.
So I have to read all the ifs, ands, and buts through this whole thing, but if a kid's doing fairly well in school, then the parents can say, I'll bet that he or she will take the SATs and maybe get a 550 on it, and just say, my kid's not taking the Keystones. I mean, is that,
Well,
Because you can pretty much opt out for anything now, as a lot of our kids have, right? That's,
So you'd have to opt out, yes. You'd still have to go through the process of opting out because we are still required by law to provide the 3 Keystone exams. And technically, the kids are supposed to take it.
and unrelated, but somewhere in here, enlisting in the armed forces, I would assume is full-time employment.
Actually, I had asked Mr. Grove about that, who asked the IU. Basically, yes, they classify, because I saw ASVAB, but then nothing about enlistment in the military. Obviously, I was looking for that one. And they said, yes, it falls under the employment piece.
Could you work at Rudders for a week and then quit? Does that count as full-time?
As long as Rudders gave you a letter to provide to us that they have a full-time employment, once we have that letter, we wouldn't go back checking on them.
Yeah, so,
Right.
no, I'm done, thanks.
Just real quick, how would our school stack up? I mean, Pennsylvania average 51% would graduate. How would we do?
We would be around 60%.
Okay. And then the other thing on the tracking as far as whether they're going to a college, we have to send out college transcripts to the college when they apply, right? As far as if you're going to apply somewhere, they need your high school transcript, so they
Correct.
send it out. So could we use that as a kind of a tick mark to say we need to track this particular student with their parents to know whether or not they did it? So if this parent's coming in and say, oh, they got accepted to wherever, and you go, well, you never asked for the transcript, so you probably didn't apply to wherever. So, or vice versa, could you get something back from the schools?
Yeah, we could definitely use that as kind of a check and balance. Like if we got a letter and then we look there and that they never, applied to Harvard, we could use that as a check and balance. But to get it straight from the system that they put it into, the acceptance letter doesn't go through that, so we'd still be dependent upon the parent to provide that, or the child to provide it.
And one different thing, one of the pieces you talked about students with IEPs, and I think it's like 13 or 14% of our students fall in that category. But a large number of those would be taking the regular testing things at all. There might be a smaller percentage of that.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, that goes on their goals.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think a thing, regardless of what it is, just trying to communicate that and track it to, people are gonna pay attention to this page to start with as it is.
Right.
We had difficulty listening to you for that long.
Sorry about that.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Mr. Kaufman, do you have any idea in order of magnitude of how much it's going to cost to provide all this information to give Mr. Gothi some more ammunition?
At this point, it's going to be very costly, other than people's time in order to do it.
Well, that's a lot of money.
I'm thinking from like having to purchase some type of tracking mechanism
I
or so
think
forth.
people's
It's going to be
time
the,
being diverted, because it's being diverted away from the learners.
Anything you can think of. Additional employee for the life of the thing. 2 FTEs, benefits, healthcare, yeah, everything.
For, we may have to put something in the budget if this becomes a mandated thing that, say these people are doing these functions, and if they have to now do these functions, you don't have enough personnel, that becomes a budget item too.
Oh,
Thank you.
It'll be fascinating what the scores the state actually comes up with. The average SAT score is what, 550 or something? It's not all that high. So I can see a lot of parents saying, I'll just bet later.
Any additional questions? It would be interesting to find out if the state, it does have a plan to pull together some sort of, have they given us that sense that they are working on a tracking device? Or are they pretty much like, here's the requirements and you guys are all on your own? Like, do we have that sense we're on our own?
Yeah, no, I mean, they did mention a couple of times that they are building a toolkit that's supposed to be out before the start of next school year. But that was the extent of the conversation. They didn't describe, maybe Dr. Snell has more information.
I spoke with somebody from PDE on the next topic. When it's my turn, we'll talk about the coronavirus, but,
You're not getting a turn.
I mean, I get a turn at this rate. But the individual that I talked to, wonderful person from PDE, they were working on the toolkit as I called. So they are working on something, I can tell you that.
Sort of, they're a model. Somewhere at PDE, there exists a spreadsheet where a bologna-eating bureaucrat sat down with their sandwich and their apple and their satchel, they brought it in, and put in a number that would satisfy the legislators to say, this many kids are going to graduate. Like in their model that they've created, first of all, have they shared, like, well, we expect that a reasonable number of Pennsylvania kids to graduate is 90% or 95%. Nobody did this in a vacuum of that kind of information.
So here's the thing.
They didn't share it with you.
There's a central graduate in statistics at the Department of Education, and my son is incapable of coming up with that kind of crap.
Okay, well, let's hope we don't, I would hope that we don't invest too much time and effort and sort of just hope, I mean, we have this is a nice forum here, so we can do paper copies for a while and check the boxes, put one in every kid's folder, right? Or they don't have a folder anymore, do they? Scan into their folder and just check the boxes, so we know where we are. With that being said, if there's no more comments, I'm going to pass it back over to Mr. Grove, because I think he had some things he wanted to share with us.
Yeah, one thing to remember, whatever it is that comes down from PDE, Dr. Snell and myself, we stand in front of a judge and we take an oath. And we swear to uphold the laws of the state of Pennsylvania. So whatever comes our way, with all due diligence, we will gather the information and do our very best with incredible people like Mr. Kaufman, Kelly Harper, and Barb Snare. They do the heavy lifting in addition to us, and we come to the best resolution that we possibly can. So we wanted to bring that to you for your overall edification and consideration and reflection and other things, Mr. Gothi. Two closing remarks. I would be remiss if I didn't remind you, please consider April 16th. That is the annual district diversity celebration. Principal Barut Kafale, nationally known speaker, will be talking to us about equity, along with lots of vendors, a beautiful tapestry of fine folks, and a chance to just celebrate who we are with some in a wonderful environment at the high school. April 16th, 5:30 8 p.m., and something we're terribly proud of. And the final item is the March School Board Educational Focus. It is the District Mass Customized Learning Human Element Committee addressing the Year 2 comprehensive planning goals of peer mentoring. We heard that tonight from the principals, personal learning network, and finally addressing the whole learner, just speaking to the social, emotional, behavioral aspect in accompanying that of the academics. That concludes my remarks, and thank you for the time.
Okay, I guess it's time.
I have two things that I'll mention from a calendar basis as I ask Ms. Romig and Mr. Billett to come forward to assist. Number one, next Monday night, 5:30, we have a workshop, Trauma-Informed Care. Again, I'll follow up with that in an email. And then Senator Arnold, our newest legislator locally here, will visit the district April 1st at 9 a.m. Again, I will share that with you. Yes, sir, I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to share. And he is on the Education Committee, as far as I have been told. So I will start this update on the coronavirus with my activity this morning, and I'll transition into Mr. Billett and Ms. Romig. I attended late last week, Representative Perry invited a number of constituents to Hershey for a sort of closed-door session this morning with medical professionals from infectious control and all of those wonderful people in the field trying to handle all of this. So we had a wonderful meeting, provided a number of updates as to the history of this. We went back so far as to talk about SARS in 2002 and MERS, if you remember, in 2012. And so there was a great deal of background, and then it was an open forum to ask a lot of questions. And so we received a lot of information today. Apparently, obviously, nobody is providing any real guidance as to what a school should do should X, Y, or Z happen. And so we're, having great conversations tomorrow. Superintendents from IU 12, York, Adams, and Franklin counties will be together on a phone call. I know my colleagues to the north in IU-15 are meeting on Wednesday. We're all staying in, connection. But we'll provide you a brief update. We'll be happy to answer any questions. I'll turn it over to the two folks in front of you, and will you share the meeting that you attended as well this morning?
Thank you, Dr. Snell. So this morning, Julie and I attended a meeting in Carlisle for the Cumberland County Emergency Management Agency. It was a joint meeting with the York County Emergency Management Group and Bill James, who oversees that. We've been in close contact with them through this obviously fluid situation with coronavirus. We have been monitoring all updates from the CDC as well as PA Department of Health. We get those updates twice daily. And then PDE has provided us with some additional updates as well. Through this situation, we are going to, this Thursday, engage our core safety committee. We're going to call it a Corona Task Force internally here to meet for the first time to discuss officially some of the steps that have been recommended to us at some of these trainings. We've met as a cabinet team to discuss this, but wanted to get more key personnel around the table here within the district as we consider prevention, mitigation, and then containment should the virus come into York County. So just very quickly, some of the things that we have done to date, we have increased cleaning and as best we can, sanitization at all of our buildings, disinfecting as many surfaces that would be commonly touched within our buildings. We have a fogging machine that we have used several times in classrooms, and this is something, by the way, that we typically do during the flu season anyway. So if attendance, we see a spike in absenteeism in a particular classroom, we will take that fogging machine, fog that classroom overnight, perfectly safe for kids to return the next day to try to mitigate any of those viruses that may be floating around in our buildings. All of our buses we have a misting device that we're using on all of our buses at least twice a week. We're hoping to increase that to 3 times a week. It's based on some staffing, so they're working hard at that. We have confirmed that we have appropriate supply levels of hand sanitizer and some of the key supplies that we may need here moving forward. Since January, we have been monitoring staff and student attendance levels, as I mentioned, and so we're looking at that to make sure that we don't see any spikes as well on the staff side, as well as monitoring any travel that our staff has made outside of the area. As I mentioned, Bill James with York County Emergency Management Office has been wonderful in keeping us constantly in the loop. There is a web EOC as well as a York County JIS system that is in the process of being turned on for us, that we will be able to interact and receive consistent messaging with folks around the county that are key players in sort of the county's response to all of this, so that we have the most updated information possible. Should we need to close at any point, we are working to ensure that we can provide some continuity of instruction through the 4 remaining flexible instruction days that we have. And then we're working hard as well, if we would need to go beyond that, what options are available to us. So we have been working with teachers and administrators internally to come up with some options should we need that, and we're considering all things, including Wi-Fi access at home for those that don't have it, and lots of options surrounding that. So before I go into some final points, I'll have Julie share communications that we have made to date.
Good evening. So our focus to date has really been taking a page from the CDC and the Department of Health recommendations based on the stage that we're in terms of the pandemic. So initially we really started with awareness and education, and that was really reinforcing the messages that they were sharing with us to clean, to contain, what's that third C? And to mitigate. So at this point, because it has spread to the United States and there are cases in this area, they're sort of shifting the focus from just awareness and education and basic hygiene and things that we would do during flu season anyway, to sort of reinforce the messaging of staying home if you're sick, but also to really ramp up efforts to make sure people know where to go for trusted information and accurate updates. We've been trying to establish a portal for our families so that they can just come to us and we'll be a conduit to the CDC and the Department of Health, so they don't have to Google or look, because sometimes people can come up with crazy things through those efforts on their own. One of the things that we're also doing is trying to train families, like we would in any emergency, to know where to expect the information to be delivered. Today at our conference, they talked about being cautious of scam accounts or students who might stage an effort to do something on social media. And I raised my hand and said, you know, we've already experienced that. So that is definitely a concern that other districts are preparing for, as well as one that we've experienced. We're also collaborating with communication directors throughout the county at several different school districts to try to ensure that we have consistent messaging and pool our resources in one area in particular related to translating the materials that we receive. The only translations we've gotten so far have been 1 or 2 handouts, and they've just been from the Department of Health in Spanish. So we are looking at tapping into other resources and sharing that effort so that we can ensure that we are able to communicate very important health information to all of our families who would need to receive that. And then the final piece is really ensuring that our staff, in particular our frontline staff, people in our offices, have accurate and timely information, because very often they're the people who take the parents who walk in or take the phone calls and want to share some information with them. So we're working on communication, not just externally for parents and guardians, but also internally for our staff.
Thank you. So our focus on continuity of service right now and our ability to run school on a daily basis really focuses on our staff and our ability to find substitutes for any staff that may be out. We are continually working with the substitute teacher service that we utilize as they grapple with this. We will continue to work with them and find any option that we possibly have at our disposal to make sure that we can continue to operate. That includes bus drivers. You know, we had 4 drivers that were not at work today because they were sick, not coronavirus, but they were just ill. And so we had to double up 2 runs. And so we, on a daily basis, I'm working with Reliance as well to ensure that we can pick up kids and get them to school through all of this. So, you know, those are some pretty key personnel, as well as looking at food service staff. You know, all of those critical pieces for us to be able to run a typical day of school, we are monitoring very closely. We are also, if we get to that point, we will consider, and we've started to discuss, some of the social distancing that is recommended as a result of this. Anything from large events, from concerts to mini-thon, prom. You know, we mentioned a few things tonight, even diversity celebrations, field trips. All of those sorts of things where there is the potential for larger gatherings of people. Outside groups coming in, things like what do we do with the wonderful plays that we had this weekend, making sure we're doing a thorough cleaning of the auditorium with a large number of people that were here. So sports are obviously in play. We received a message from PIAA. There's no plans right now to ban fans from those events, but it has happened. In Division III NCAA basketball tournament, there were fans that were not allowed at the first round. So those sorts of things are starting to happen, and again, we're keeping a close eye. Obviously, no direction has been provided by PIAA, PDE, CDC, PA Department of Health regarding what we should do. Right now, it's left to the local the local body here to make those decisions, but we certainly, if we receive direction from them to act in a certain way, obviously we will follow that guidance. And, you know, we're just trying to stay ahead of this so we can make the best decisions moving forward.
Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yes, Joe.
This is an issue, obviously, for this year that we're dealing with what's in front of us. Some of these, this is not going to be just to the end of the school year thing. This is going to be into next year and beyond. And has any feedback been sought at this point from individuals within in different departments in the district as to what additional ongoing costs there may be? You said the additional cleanings and all those things all sound like fantastic ideas. I didn't even know this fogger machine exists. It's wonderful to know that this is out there. But if we're going to be running it more, we're going to need more staffing. Is that something that we should be considering and getting input in the budget process for?
Yes, I think so. Now, one of the things with the governor declaring a state of emergency, any of those additional services that we would need now and into the future, we would be able to apply for some reimbursement on those expenses that are incurred. We discussed that this morning at the training that we were at. So I think as we learn the scope of this, we can better inform you, the board, in terms of what our request might be for. Well, I can't say that, but in terms of supplies or people resources we may need to ensure the safety of our students, we'll certainly bring that to you with a request if we get to that point.
Are we doing anything in terms of communication with the students? You know, because we have two sides of this. There's the practical side of what do we do to try to mitigate it and whatever, but there's also the fear side where the kids hear about it all the time, and you know, we want to quell those fears as much as we can in the environment we're in. So are we doing assemblies, handouts, announcements?
I don't think
anything?
we've reached the assembly point yet, but I do know there were some resources specifically designed for children and younger age children to talk about the coronavirus. There was a great, almost kind of a comic graphic piece that was created specifically for children in basically kindergarten through grades 8 that talks about what this virus is, what they should really be worried about. It was really well done. So the principals all had that to share with their students, as well as to share with parents who are looking for a way to talk about this with their children in a less scary, more factual kind of way. I thought it was a great resource, so we did put that out. We do routinely, and at this stage, working with our families and within our buildings and with our students on sort of those best practices to keep yourself healthy and generally during flu season, and that's been the same guidance that we've had from CDC and Department of Health for staying healthy during the coronavirus at this time. So they have been reinforcing the hand washing, the covering your cough, staying home if you're sick, and making sure that they have that accurate information and the reassurance that what they would do in this particular case is very similar to what they would do generally speaking during flu season to stay healthy.
Yeah, this is more of a well done. I think it was last Wednesday we got an email from Dr. Snell, and he forwarded some information that Julie had submitted to the newspaper, and within 2 hours from when you got that email, we responded with a whole lot of information, what the district is doing and the consideration of what's going on in this issue. And that, because I looked down and said, wait a minute, that was the same day, within 2 hours we did that, so that's well done.
Anyone else? Yeah, I was monitoring that. I looked at the response time too, so I very, very well done. Do we have posters in the school? Posters at all? I noticed when I was at, we do? Or the CDC? Because I saw some that came out that when I was at Tech the other day, and they have a nice illustration, but they do a lot of their own stuff, but it does say CDC on it. But it would also be nice to just have, it just says, to avoid the spread of germs. It'd be nice if we put those up every winter or all the time. We had one, in the bathroom or in the hallways to say, I don't know where they came from, but
We have a lot of those type of posters. I remember at Tech seeing the CDC poster. I can't say for sure whether that specific poster is at our building, up in all our buildings, but we do have at every single building, reminder to wash hands. In almost all the bathrooms, there's something posted for that. I can speak from experience. The elementaries do a lot of work reminding kids to wash their hands after going to the bathroom, and it's kind of a routine that's built into that experience. So, yeah, we're reminding kids a lot.
okay, thank you.
Just back when we had the FIDS thing start up, you did a presentation, I believe, that talked about our capacity and our ability to service that and make sure we had enough bandwidth, basically. I imagine that still holds true, that we're able to do that if we need to.
Yes.
Okay, and that if we have to do that next fall, for instance, that's something that is in place already that we don't have to worry about upgrading. Okay. I guess that's about enough for right now.
Anyone else? Anything else? Okay. All right, at this point, we are at the moment where thank you very much. We welcome citizen comments. If anyone would like to come up and address the board, please state your name, and we request that you speak for a period of no longer than 5 minutes. Okay. In that case, we're going to move on to summer school offerings.
Mr. Grove.
This is an annual report, and I believe that one of the attachments speaks to that of the 2020 proposal. And with us, obviously, we have our middle school and high school principals. But for your edification, in there are the courses that are offered, some of the requirements associated, and obviously the goal is to make sure that any learner that didn't experience success is provided an additional opportunity to do that. So that is for the board's review and an annual offering.
At this point, are there any questions?
Next item is the professional education workshop. Mr. Grove.
Quickly, compliments to Mrs. Johnson and Mrs. Grothy for joining us on the Professional Education Committee. And what we have successfully done is created 6-hour workshops for the board's review and subsequent approval. We're very proud of these offerings. I think we not only provide a wide range of voice and choice, we do it in a very economic way. Some of the courses are free, costing us obviously nothing, and again, giving chances, opportunities for teachers to participate in out-of-the-box thinking and doing. So another annual opportunity and for your review and subsequent approval.
Does anybody have any comments, any discussion on the offerings?
I
Yes.
just have a general question. Who runs these workshops? I mean,
What happens, Ms. Guth, is that we put out the workshops and then a teacher is offered. They sort of apply, and then they are, if necessary, interviewed for the position. If not, they are provided the opportunity to lead that, and they deliver the workshop.
Anyone else?
Next item is dual enrollment agreements. Mr. Grove.
Another annual offering, and a compliment to Mrs. Jody Grothy, again, for participating in the dual enrollment process. So the agreements have been provided for your review, and ultimately, York College as well as Penn State York have submitted their applications on time, their agreements, and HAC is in the process, I believe, of working towards completing that. So actually, Penn State York, my apologies. Penn State York's the one that is finalizing their agreement. So Mrs. Johnson has seen the contracts, you have seen the contracts, and this approval allows us to move forward for the dual enrollment offerings for the 2021 school year.
Because these agreements don't include the college and the high school part of that. Is that a separate agreement that we have for those offerings? Or
You're
I don't know
correct.
how that works, you know.
Correct. It does not include the college and the high school, and I'd probably defer to Mr. Kaufman as far as those schools and our teacher certifications, which would allow us to offer that at our high school, those courses. We can do that.
Yeah. Teachers have to have a master's in the subject area in which they're, so, you know, for example, Pitt, I think is one that we use, and so they might need to go there to get some additional training, but they have to have a master's, for example, in English or math in the subject in which they can qualify to teach college and the high school. We're good. Next item is the Summer Food Service Program. I'll ask Ms. Ansel to come forward, as well as Emily Stump. I'll ask Ms. Ansel to do an introduction for the board, and she will go over the Summer Food Service Program.
Good evening. With me tonight is Emily Stump, our new food service director. Although she's new to this position, she's been with the district for about 15 years, and she has been part of the summer food service program from day one, helping to plan and organize and run that program with the rest of the team that we have working with us. And so tonight we're going to share some of the general information about the summer food service program for the benefit of the new board members. We'll talk about where we've been and then our proposal for this summer. So the Summer Food Service Program is a federally funded program that's been in existence since 1976. It's operated by the USDA and administered through PDE. Central York received a 5-year approval back in 2016, and so this summer will be our 5th year to operate the program. We receive a federal subsidy for each meal that we serve during the summer months, and then this program we account for separately in our food service fund, which is separate from the general fund, and we account for this program separately within that fund to keep track of our revenues and expenses. So we have been, as I mentioned, last year was our 4th year of operating our program. We have 3 locations at Hayshire, Stony Brook, and last year was the first year to add York Learning Center to our program. We serve lunch Mondays through Thursdays, and we operated 9 weeks last summer for 35 days. And you'll see there that we served almost 9,000 student meals last summer, and then the adults can purchase a meal, and we sold 933 adult meals. This slide shows the number of days that we operate each summer based on the school calendar. And over the last 4 years, we started at Hayshire the first year and then added Stony Brook the next 3 years. And then York Learning Center was last year, was the first year for that location. And you'll see the number of meals that we served at each of those buildings each year. And this next slide shows the average daily meals served. And so we see a nice increase. We're happy with the increase in the meals that we're serving with our attendance. We look for continued growth in our program and in the number of meals that we serve. So this is our financial summary from last summer. There it lists that we receive $4.05 for each student meal that we serve throughout the summer. And again, that's a subsidy from the federal government. And then we also sell meals to adults for the same amount. So our total revenue was $36,894. And then listed there are the various expenses that we have for our program. So we have salary and benefits, food, supplies, and then we also allocate the portion of electricity costs for our cafeteria and kitchen area. We work with Mr. Kessler and determine the amount that is our share of that cost and have it allocated toward this program, for the net income amount last summer being $188. We're not permitted to have a big profit on this program, so the closest to break even that we can come is where we need to be. They set the federal subsidy at an amount that hopefully you'll be able to break even, and so we are happy to come in right above net income, which we have for the last 3 years. This chart shows our current free and reduced percentage by building, and so Hayshire is now at 56%, and then our other location, Stony Brook, is currently at 40% free and reduced population. So our proposal for this summer is to operate the program like we did last summer at the same 3 locations. We have 2 paid cooks at each location, and then Emily, as our food service director, would float between the 3 locations, assisting as needed. And then the rest of our staffing requirements we fill with our volunteers. So our volunteers help with serving the students, they help clean up, they assist in any way that we need. Our volunteers are amazing. We could not run this program without them. We would definitely not be successful without their help. Another aspect of the whole volunteer piece is that this program gives students that need volunteer hours for certain organizations that they belong to. This program gives them that opportunity to come in and get volunteer hours for those organizations that they may need volunteer hours for. This chart shows the number of hours we've had for our volunteers by building over the last 4 years. So last summer, those hours total about 780 hours, and that's made up of 164 people, 164 volunteers. So we would look to run the program for 9 weeks over the summer months, continuing to serve lunch Monday through Thursday from 12 to 1. And then we also have an educational component, so we would continue to offer books to children. We organize and schedule the bookmobile to coordinate with our summer food service program. And then you'll see several other opportunities we have done in the past. We work together as a team and plan with the principals and our staff additional educational opportunities each summer and how we can grow in this area and just add more opportunities for the students. We then create a calendar that Julie posts on the website for us of not only our menu for the summer, but also our educational opportunities. So this would be the proposed days of operation. starting June 8th, hopefully, and then running through August 6th, which would give us a week before school would begin to get ready for the new school year. We take food allergies very seriously, and we make sure we meet the needs of all of our students that have any kind of dietary restrictions, and so we have alternative food available and drinks available for these students to meet their needs. And then finally, we use all the methods available to us, working with Julie to get the word out on our program, and also communicate with our Panther Pantry families to make sure they're aware of this opportunity in the summer. And that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions for us, we'd be happy to answer them.
I have one informational questions because I'm new and I don't know a lot about the history. Are these meals offered exclusively to Central District
So
students?
it's an open site, and so any student 18 or under can come into one of our locations and get a meal. We feel that most of them are Central students, but there could be students from other districts or other locations that come in as well.
Yeah, I'm very confused about the York Learning Center. Is that a central school, or is it a school where people are fed from other?
It used to be the old,
Right, I
the Central High
understand
School.
what
It's
the-
now called the York Learning Center. It's owned and operated by the IU, which is a conglomeration of.
The intermediate unit owns that building, but we actually provide the food service for them with our, I guess, Emily addresses better than I can. But then again, it's in North York, which is part of our student base.
Okay.
Mr. King?
Two quick questions. One, would we be able to obtain a copy of the PowerPoint?
Absolutely.
And
I'll post this right after the meeting's done.
Thank you.
In board docs.
And second question, do we have any reason to believe that the cost would differ? Obviously, if the number of students and/or parents coming through, obviously that could play some factor, but what you've seen over the course of the last 4 years, anything lead you to believe that it would change that much from I saw it was a net of 188, that it's plus minus?
We really are able to fill in with our volunteers with what we need. We feel that the 2 paid positions, the 2 cooks would be sufficient. And then on any given day, last summer, you would see 3 or 4, 5 volunteers at each location. So that really helps us to be able to break even.
So you don't expect it,
No.
any change other than cost neutral, essentially?
Correct.
Thank you.
And I'll say for board members, newer board members and older board members, last year, about 22 days, I volunteered and served at Stony Brook. So if there's operational questions of what that looks like, I'll be happy to answer that during the week to anyone if they'd ask.
And please, we welcome anyone to come and visit us. Any of those 3 buildings between 12 and 1, come out, check it out, have lunch.
I just wanted to say congratulations, Emily,
Thank
on your
you.
new position. Very
Thank you.
excited for you.
I do have one comment, and I think I thought about this last year a little bit, is about clearances because of our volunteers. And I know we don't want to turn, a young student away that comes to offer to help or read a book to somebody, but how do we address those?
Thanks for mentioning that. I forgot. I apologize. But all of our volunteers have their clearances, and they can't be on the volunteer list. We check them off before they even come in, and so we have a Google Doc, and all of them have their clearances and can't come in before they.
So we have, like, Mr. Wagner, people that are coming in regularly, and so we've had time to vet them and just say, okay.
Absolutely.
What you're asking is, I was able to get my clearances, which surprised me too, Jane.
I just really wanted to make sure if you're there 22 days that you do have it.
Got his clearances.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, and then, Mr. Gressler, if you could get that, you have the PowerPoint? Somebody, we'll get it out, to everybody, so you have the data. Okay, super. Okay, thank you very much.
One
Oh,
other
sorry.
question. Are there any other staff members or things that are controlled from central, the office administrative side who invest much time or anything in it? I'm just trying to get a picture of the whole, like you, Kim.
I do invest some time, yes. But probably, I think that's our 2 paid cooks, Emily and then myself. which my time would not have been shown in that financial piece, but
Okay, thank you.
sure.
Next item is the capital reserve projects for this summer. I'll turn it over to Mr. Kessler.
Sure, thank you. So attached was a final draft to say where we're at. I think in January, we had posted a bigger list that had 600,000 or 700,000 on and maybe 20 projects. We continued to evaluate, rank, get drilled down to what can be pushed off versus what's still out there over the next 6 to 8 to 10 years that we know of, as well as fine tune what we would request that would need to be done this summer. And so attached was the list, the 2 roof replacement sections. We pushed those off from last year, did some repair work, but they are definitely in need of replacement, 2 sections at those buildings. And then really the other 2, the Sinking Springs sound system was the last of the 5 elementary buildings that was no longer supported and outdated and would be on our list as a must-have. They've been having some experiences there with technical difficulties. The high school, the stadium sound system, again, now 15-plus years old. Could it maybe make it through, but it started to experience downtime and replacement parts as well have been serviced the last couple of years. We've pushed that off a year or 2. And then from the weather, really, the pictures that we had presented, and I can open that here as well, the high school, the whole original section of the high school, so you can see every single window, and this is just one wing. So the caulk and joints around all of those, there are several places that have had, under our monsoons of storms, that have had leaks. That is not window related, but the caulk and expansion joints in some places of the building. So to have a contractor come in and redo all of that is the other main thing from a building envelope perspective that we would really need. Then there was a couple of technology items that are equipment items that are not in the general fund budget as far as in the budget that we have under general fund and operational items. Every 5 to 8 years, we've done switches out of cap reserve, and then some of the controllers as well, the access points. So Joe Lucia, our IT director, had a couple of items of explanation on those. So that's our recommendation at this point, where we're down to, again, pretty close to the 300,000 that we have in the budget to transfer. For this summer, we do have a little over 1.6 million. Now, out of that 1.6 million will be the 160,000 for the Stony Brook chiller. So that would be down to about just under 1.5 million after the Stony Brook chiller, and then we'd be looking at this set. So we'll be happy to take questions, comments, concerns, feedback.
We've got 900,000 square feet of space overall.
Yes, sir.
And so if it's $480,000, then we're about, 50 cents per square foot?
Yes, sir.
Are these necessarily aren't hard numbers at this point, or some of those are
That's
some
correct.
projection numbers? Typically, we've come in a little bit under that,
Yes,
but
so
doesn't
even
mean we will.
even the roof bids, we would anticipate, could they come in at 92, 93, 96? That's a rough number with the independent company that did all of our analysis, said if you budget the 100,000, you'll get your 11, 12,000 square foot roof section done for under that. That's a maximum amount. So could that be less? Yes. The sound system at Sinking Springs would be right at 20,000. The other 4 elementaries were the same cost. We could save on the expansion joints. That could be less once it's bid. The tech items, those are exact prices for the technology ones. So we could save 10 to 20,000.
Are any of these items under any kind of warranty, so you have some kind of ideas of useful life?
Yes, so the roof would have a 10-year, both roof sections would have 10-year warranties, for everything inclusive, so that is nice on the 2 roof replacements. Again, the ones being replaced are 30-plus years old, but both of those, the sound system, either of them, the same company who we looked at that's done the others would assumingly be the low bidder on those. They would have a 2-year warranty. I can ask, I have no idea about caulking expansion joints and windows. I don't know if there'd be, hopefully some short term, there would be, 6 months, 12 months, we can find out. The technology equipment, I'm sure there's a warranty on some of that, but I can check with Mr. Lucia on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? That puts cap reserve down to what, $1 million? When you subtract?
1.5.
No.
No,
so-
when we subtract this, where are we right now? Like, at the bottom? We're
Well, we're
1.6 now, we
1.6.
take off the chiller.
Right.
We take all of this stuff off.
Then yes, we will be down to about
1 million.
1.15
That's what-
before, because we haven't gotten to a final budget adoption in June, that's correct. So in theory, approving these right now before any final budget in June, we would be down to 1.1, a little over 1.1, yes.
I know I've seen these numbers, but I don't have them in front of me. What are you expecting over the next 2 or 3 years in terms of total?
Yeah. So we did post that for the board, and as part of April, right, we have our rolling 8, and so during our April workshop, we can go through that as well. We're doing that for food service as well, adding that to the food service budget. What's our next 8 years, 5, 10 years out? It averages anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million a year over the next 8 years, 9 years, from additional chillers we heard about to come, a couple of HVAC items, some controllers that are outdated, additional roof. We have maybe $50,000 to $100,000 a year in a couple of different roofs of our 7, 8 buildings. So yes, there is, and we've pushed some off and held out as long as we could, but there is future costs lined up, yes.
Anyone else? Any questions? This will be up for action next week, or whenever we meet again. I don't know if is there anything on that list that, I think we've pushed the roofs, I think we've pushed the PA systems a couple of times, and anything that could fall off the list?
Can't fall into the
Yeah.
because they're already bigger.
There's no carpet. Again, we push off carpet for a while. Even what's left that is aging, it's not, it's not a trip hazard, other things like that. We've pushed off several other things that we can hold off that aren't costing us either 10 or 20% of the cost either of, repairs or maintenance or outside contractor service during the year. So I think those are pretty mission critical at this time.
Thank you. Okay.
Next item is the summer work schedule. Mr. Kessler, annual approval?
Yes, similar to, and again, as you heard under the food service presentation, operating under the assumption Monday through Thursday, the district now 7 or 8, I've lost track, probably 8, 9, 10 years now. I think right around 2010 we started this, 2011. So we've been doing it for some time, having the 410s, the memorandum of understandings there with the support staff union that would set the schedule and options. Again, as a baseline, it has saved us with being able to be in unoccupied mode, lights off, an extra day, those types of things. And the staff seem to, it's just sort of that normal course of action, 410s. Some use vacation days on the Friday and work 4/8s. We manage it well with the summer help that we get for cleaning and maintenance and other jobs, so we'd recommend to continue it. Be happy to answer any questions.
Only because I would feel bad if I didn't say this. Since we're like 8, 9 years into this, can we amend that before next week and make it between now and the end of the support staff contract? And make it a multi-year memorandum of understanding rather than...
Sure.
I mean, we're going to do it, right? I would imagine.
And even if we didn't, we could come back to change it or cancel it. If we could. We have 2 more years. We have 2021 and 21-22 of under contract.
And I always say it because it becomes a function each year administratively for someone to go through these steps.
We're happy to do that if that's the wish of the board. Everybody okay?
Anybody have a problem with that? Any objections to that?
Do it every year? Okay,
Okay.
we will do that.
And the only question I have is, do we have many, maybe this is, I don't know who the question's for, Do we have any that do the 5 days without taking that third option?
We-
Because I'm wondering if we even keep that.
We have a handful, and that's more, we have a couple of maintenance guys and a couple of custodians. Now, what's nice is, I will say, like the last week of June, at the high school, the York County Senior Games are there, and they're there Monday through Saturday. So on a Friday, when they're outside using the track and other stuff, we have the custodians that have picked that 5-8 to cover that, or to open the high school, because they do need the gymnasium for some things. So we're almost using that as the rental coverage, if there's swim meets or other things. There's 1 or 2 other events in July that happen on a Friday, York Revolution, rent our field. So there are a handful, I want to say 6, 7 people, and primarily they're at the high school providing coverage on that time, not actually out in buildings unless we need a maintenance person where the building has to be empty. So there's a handful.
Quick question.
Yes, Mr.
So the staff you have pretty much is a set from the year prior type of thing?
It's pretty,
So that leads into the previous presentation about the coronavirus. What about more custodians or something? Do we need to budget for that or anything for cleaning?
We've had conversations this past week. Mr. Kessler went out and called a number of companies. What would it mean if we needed some on an urgent sort of, and they could send, commit 20 folks. Now that's provided 20 other people didn't beat us to the punch kind of a thing. So I don't believe that at this point there's any budgetary impact with, a full-time custodian or a couple. It's something we ought to consider, be fluid with, but at this moment, we're pretty covered. And actually, knock on wood, in terms of those positions, we are probably more fully staffed in the custodial department than we have been historically. We're very pleased, and we hope to keep it that way. So nothing at this point, but let's keep talking about it.
Okay, no more questions? Moving on.
Last item is a budget update, Mr. Kessler.
and we will do the same thing as a food service. We will post this as soon as the meeting's done, so that you guys have it, so the public has it. We'll post it in board docs and on our budget site. This is again, update to leading up to, we had to note what our meetings will be in April. So just to look back to where we were December 2nd, this is the summary page from when we did our preliminary budget. That at that point in December 2nd, with no tax increase, we were looking at a $3.1 million deficit for next year based on what we knew back then as far as revenue projections and expense projections. And so as we take it from December 2nd, this was a slide from our presentation, December 2nd, to say, okay, why that increase? What's that coming from? So from the previous page, here's the 4.1 million budget increase, and these are all, or the majority of that amount. So salary increase, we have all of our contracts under contract for next year. Special education services at that time was projecting a significant increase. We feel as we play it out, we hope that can come down a little bit more as we continue to look at those numbers and know what's coming into our doors for next year, what the IU cost will be. So we hope that's a little lower, but that was a placeholder back in December. We knew the PCERS retirement, again, that number was set for next year. And we can gladly look at what future costs might be just to have that on the horizon as well. Total new positions. So the next slide will break down the 538 that we built in December. Cyber charter, I know we've talked about with the board in workshops in history and analysis. We had a small increase for last year. We've experienced increases in our numbers, and so we were projecting getting up to, we were a little over last year in cost, and so we had a larger number there. Maybe that can come down a little bit, or if there is any reform. Social Security, that's our cost, our share of employer tax on the salaries, and then transportation, at that point in December, based on what next year's contract would be, was an increase. And so as far as the new positions, again in December, we had built in this list of positions into next year's budget. So they would be all new positions at this time. And so we had intensive learning support both at the elementary and secondary level, and those are the two must-haves, so these are sort of in order. As of now, those are based on class load, requirements from the state. Again, Dr. Lease is here, and we've gone through Those top 4 line items are necessity. From then on down, we had added an 18 to 21 transition class at the high school, but we did not have any assistants, instructional assistants. We had a teacher we added this year for the first time to service those students. The size and caseload there, we're recommending putting in an instructional assistant to help out with that. Additional positions, elementary counselor, secondary counselor, 2 part-time cafeteria building assistants. There's no coverage as far as they get pulled, and I think we had shared that back in December of how that works. Every other building, high school and the 5 elementaries, have 2 dedicated cafeteria assistants for that 2 or 3 hour chunk of time. There's none at the middle school, so they're being pulled from other resources currently for coverage, so that small amount. And back then, based on schedules, we have a half-time math teacher. We were projecting needing that to go to full-time, but when you'll see coming up here, that's one that we'll no longer need. So as we turn forward from where we were in December, I will zoom in on this one. And so we break this page down, and this becomes part of our budget document going forward. Again, here is the 3.1 million where we were as of December 2nd. So as of March 9th, we have two extra line items from real estate. Transfer taxes have been much higher, as well as taxes in lieu of taxes. So when the county pays for and the state pays for reimbursements of non-taxable properties, both of those are up significantly in this year as well as the last year or two. So we have another $100,000 in revenue locally. We read last month after the governor's budget, I think we shared the $133,000 and the $48,000 from the state budget projection. This $55,000 is a net. We lose 50%. So yes, the rate reduction back in December was $110,000 on the expense side that it will save us, but we lose half of that 50% reimbursement on the revenue side from the state. So the net of those two, we did anticipate $55,000 savings. It's just where we reflect it budgetarily. And then this number is just a placeholder at this time of what the maximum tax increase would generate, $1.2 million of revenue. On the expense side, we talked about the PSERS. Our retirement window is over. We have 6 teacher retirements that were submitted, and then based on those higher top salaries coming off, and we budgeted a master's step 2 coming in, so less salary, less PSERS, less Social Security taxes, that we would have savings. So replacing those 6 positions, not furloughing or not eliminating them, but just through attrition, we would have $283,000 of savings. We had not filled, and we had discussed it last year, we used to have an instructional advisor, so we added a special education supervisor a year ago, 2 years ago. This position was filled and took a different teaching position. We kept it in our budget at the beginning of this year. It wasn't a cut. We made it through this year. Our recommendation is not to fill that vacant position that's been out there for over a year now. And so that would be a reduction of $131,000. Here's the reduced, then the part-time high school math to full-time from December. I can expand this, got cut off. But that's the $35,000 from that prior slide we no longer need based on schedules. We talked a little while ago with the board about we had put in for a feasibility study. At this time, we don't see a need for enrollment increase and building architect needs, so we'll take that $20,000 out. As well as we did some bus consolidation, and where we're at, we feel we can trim $45,000 off of that $105,000 from December that we saw as an increase, so we'll reduce some transportation costs for next year as well. So there's some expenses that are since December that have reduced the budget, as well as some revenue options. What it means, we have 2 pages down here. So right now, with no tax increase, we would be at 2.3 million of a deficit. That's down from the 3.1 million back in December. And then if you did a tax increase, if you included that 1.9 million, we would be at $400,000 deficit. So anywhere from 400,000 to this 2.3 million is where we are as of March 9th. So that is the update as we stand right now. Be happy to answer any questions. We will post this, and it leads up to, as I minimize it for a second, I didn't click on budget update. We have town meeting, April 7th, where we'll have, I won't talk on, I don't know what the plan is, but we'll have budget groups and focus groups and other discussions using board input and community input. And then we have 2 workshops, April 8th, April 15th, where we'll provide a bunch more details and information and discussion. So be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Your slide with the $898,000 special ed increase, is that total special ed cost increases, which I guess means inclusive of the classrooms we've brought back?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I know it's a hard question, because I almost look at those as part of just our
Right.
general
Now,
education budget
For
at this point.
2021, we're not projecting bringing anything back.
But that increase is the total of special education increase?
Yes, sir.
Not just those students who attend the,
The IU, that's not our Schedule A. This is all.
just overall? Thank you.
Then what is driving, that's an increase, so what is driving,
A large portion of it is the IU Schedule A, as well as some of the other outside placements that we have. Additional services, OT, PT, there's a multitude of things that are in there. So our total special education budget.
okay. Yes, Mr. Wagner?
Does our medical assistance reimbursement show up as a revenue source at
Yes,
some
sir.
point? Okay,
Yes, sir.
is that on one of like
Yep. So for
two-thirds of the way down?
we were
that
getting some
100-page
small
booklet?
administrative costs for the first time. We actually are getting some significant access money back as well on the
So-
revenue side,
Yeah.
which helps offset that.
What are we seeing in the special needs, or whatever we call this? The budget thing you were just talking to Mike about?
The Schedule A with the intermediate unit?
Well,
or-
what are we seeing trend-wise in terms of number of students? Because that's an unknown. Is there a trend,
Yeah,
either
we do.
stable or?
We do, and Dr. Elise works with the IU as far as the pre-K and the 4-year-olds that are coming in. I don't know about the history or the trend.
Do you want to come up and speak into the mic?
She's our director of special.
So we've been consistent at about 13% of our learners over the last 16 years. I do have information I'll share with you guys. We had talked about doing a special ed just specific to help just understand the world that is special. But we have consistently been around 13%. We've been average where the state is, so we're not too high, too low as far as identifying learners. As Mr. Kessler shared, every year we look at the kindergartners that are transitioning. That has been an increase over the last few years between autism and learners with speech language impairments that are coming in. That's been a big increase for us in the last few years. Our autism population went from about 8% to 11%, but it's grown commensurate with what Pennsylvania and the federal numbers have grown, so.
Do we have any statistics like on a cost per student? I know the amount of services is, or even if you broke it down into categories, 3 different categories to see where the growth is, and, because I think it can really add up quickly with very small numbers.
Yeah. The other thing that's been impacting us a lot lately is the outside placements of kiddos for trauma, mental health needs that are not technically IEPs or special ed, but that's another growing one. Mr. Kessler and I can certainly, we have some numbers that we kind
And
of.
we actually have to submit to the state 3 categories. You nailed it. There's category 1, 2, and 3 based on, 20,000 to like 50,000 and 60,000 to 100,000. So we track those and then we have to submit that to the state, and we've seen that increase as well.
Lots of learners requiring nurses, children who have seizures that must have a nurse with them. That's another thing in our IU bill that has gone up most recently. Learners who cannot be in school without a nurse because if they would need medication, if they would have a seizure and need medication, that's a new kind of trend. We've had 2 or 3 of those this year that we just haven't seen in a while.
But I would personally, I don't know if anybody else like to see the costs and the numbers of students over some short period of time, just to see
certainly
if there are any trends in intensity or
Vicki, we can get you a follow-up on that with the students and some of the trending changes and what we're seeing, and of course, the cost drivers. Okay?
So,
Thank you.
Just real quick, I heard you say 8 to 11%, but it's in tracking with everybody else. What time frame is that over? How many years?
So I have data back 16 years. The last, I want to say 6, I can show you when we, at a later one. We have the special education data report that comes out every year. It's lagging data because the information is reported in December. We report data twice a year for special ed, in December and January. The December one is the one that shares how many learners in each disability category, race, ethnic, that kind of stuff. So last year's, what we have right now is the 2018 data came out, but I have that for the last 16, and I want to say it's about the last 6 years it's grown, but again, I have that in a spreadsheet, and Mr. Kessler and I have been collecting a whole bunch of data I can share with you as well.
So basically 0.5% a year, something like that?
For comparative purposes, from the Department of Ed website, you can get any school district
Yep.
for comparative purposes on that.
And I actually have our neighboring data for you to
Yeah,
share at some
we
point.
did that like
We
the
did
year
that.
or the year before.
I shared on a weekly update, I want to say 2-3 months ago, I had comparative cost, total cost special ed. So we'll follow up with all of that. We'll have that for you.
If there's no more questions about the budget at our next meeting, we'll plan on taking action on the discussion items that we had tonight. And I think before that, we do have a safety meeting. No, we have trauma informed. And of course, the usual financial and reports and any personnel issues. That's what I have for now.
For the budget, what exactly are we taking action on next week? Or next meeting, I should say?
There's
There's
nothing
no,
on
this is just an update, there's no action.
This is just an
Okay,
update.
that's
We'll
what I
come
thought.
back in April.
So we don't have to approve the workshops and all that?
No, we'll just come back in April.
Summer lunch, assuming the group is in agreement?
We can bring that back for approval. It's our 5th year. We can, or if everyone's in approval, we don't necessarily need an official action item. We can nod our head and say continue.
Anyone that doesn't have anyone has a strong feeling about not continuing? And if that's the case, we can just
skip that.
plan to go ahead, okay?
We'll bring that, yeah, because we'll bring that and we're going to amend it to, coincide with the end of the support staff contract. We'll bring that one.
It'll all be in front of you, you'll know which,
Yep.
okay. Okay, and at this point, this is a second opportunity for citizens' comments. If anyone would like to come forward, please state your name, and you have 5 minutes to share. Come on down, Sheldon.
Shawna Eller. I absolutely want a vote on the summer lunch program. I will be commenting on it next week. I feel we deserve to see a vote on that. I've been waiting for many years to evaluate the changes over the past 10 years in education. Tonight, we got an assessment of the 21st century learning with technology. And the whole purpose of this was to close the gap in student learning. The result of the digital learning, we have basically 50-50. 50% of the students are actually meeting graduation requirements, the standards. This, to me, is a crisis. How does the public react to this information? Find a way to pass all students with a requirement of having a job, any job? Is this what we call striving to achieve students' full potential? This is the result of over $16,000 per student of taxpayer dollars. The only way we're going to stop dumbing our students, is to allow vouchers for school choice. We got rid of handwriting, penmanship, cursive writing, memorization, classical literature, actual history. It's really a shame. And we see the results of it. Just look at the younger people in this election. It's just changing the whole culture of my country that I love. It's a disgrace, and it's because of our education system. And this digital learning, it's all crap, and it's shameful. Thank you.
Thank you, Shava. Anyone else? Okay, if there's no more citizen comments, any of the board that would like to comment on any of our discussions this evening?
Sure, a couple things.
Or something else?
First of all, the couple things that I'm going to take up at, and I spoke to Mr. Kessler about this earlier. I'm going to try to talk with the Lincoln Benefit people about what their projections and budgeting are going to be for any impacts that we can expect on our rates as a result of COVID-19. They're not going to have a whole lot of data for us, but obviously I'm going to stress to them during the April meeting that I would like to see, obviously they're going to focus on it, they're actuaries, and they count that sort of stuff. I think I also, and instead of just saying, oh my God, how bad are the costs going to be, see if they can give us some tools or some information that can help us give our employees the information they need to make sensible financial decisions along with healthcare decisions for steering. So if somebody gets sick, whether they should go to urgent care, whether they should go to the emergency room, because they have serious cost consequences for us. And one of the things that I personally start to understand doing the Lincoln Benefit piece here is that if somebody mistakenly goes to the emergency room instead of urgent care, it has rate implications for us, and they're fairly consequential. So if we're going to see a bump in this kind of thing, it'll be helpful. And it sounds like it's skin-flinted, oh, go to the cheaper option, but it really isn't. If it doesn't make any difference in the quality of their care, that we don't want to have unnecessary emergency room visits, especially whenever employees are starting to bear at least a little bit more of their health care costs, because their rates will be affected. The other thing that I discussed with Mr. Kessler, at least briefly, is that obviously stock markets are cratering right now. Whether they should or not is really beyond the scope of what is happening. I mean, they are. That's the fact. And the end of the fiscal year for PCERS is June 30th, and I don't see any reasonable possibility that these numbers are going to recover or recuperate by then, and PCERS is going to miss their mark for their 7.25% expected investment return, and they're going to miss it very significantly. This is probably going to be the worst year for them since the financial crisis of 2008, and we're going to have a corresponding budget increase cost that will not fall in this current budget coming up, but rather the following one, because they'll set their rate in December of 2020 for the year that we have, that is 2021 through 22. Okay, so we're not going to eat that cost increase this current budget, but the following one, it is going to be a significant one, and there are no rate caps in place for PCERS. It floats basically now, more or less based on investment returns, how short the investments turn out to be, and how big the hold is that this PCERS has in terms of paying out their projected benefits. So we're going to see likely increases in health insurance rates next year. They're going to be significant. We're going to see very significant PCERS increases going forward, and we're likely to experience significantly higher costs for substitute teachers, and we need to do some things to try to mitigate the damage on those things to some extent. I think, and I spoke briefly to Mr. King today, since he's the legislative guy, in my fit of pique earlier about the ridiculousness of Keystones, that we ought to do something about that. I think we also ought to ask our legislators for some expedient action here on the option of giving FIDs for more than just 5 days, because in this, at least for the next year or two, and I think that we ought to ask for that promptly. I hope that there are smart people in I hope there are people in Harrisburg that are thinking of that, but they need to get off their butts and move on it. And I think we have some people in York that can move that for us. But those are things that I've been thinking of, and not just in, like I said, in terms of, oh, the sky is falling, there's doom and gloom, but what can we do to try to mitigate some of it and cause it to have less damage for our taxpayers? But particularly, I think, I need to look to Lincoln Benefit and see if they can help us with that, because they've got some guidance. They're the ones that people are having contact with for their benefits anyway, and if they hear it from them, then hopefully that'll be a trusted source to remind them to go where it is cost effective rather than panicking and go to the emergency room, which may not be helpful, and in fact, in some cases, may be more dangerous. So in any case, those are sort of the doom and gloom notes, but also the efforts of what we can do to try to mitigate it. Thank you.
Greg?
I was just going to publicly say that I thank the administration. We had a very useful all-day Saturday that took a lot of effort on their part, and I'm sure Brent and company spent a lot of hours preparing all the stuff that we looked at, and it was truly outstanding. So I'm appreciative. Jane, you said that we would have some sort of mechanism to take that further. What are we going to?
We're going to get together this week and just sort of go through all of our talking points, make sure that we haven't dropped the ball on anything, and then we'll follow up with you guys on things, whatever actions we feel we need.
Yeah, and there was a few things that probably got curtailed a little bit just in the name of time, so I don't want that to fall off the table. But it was truly an outstanding session, and thank you for everybody giving up their Saturdays. And it was well worth the time, I think, to go to VOTEC. That's always, it was good for everybody to see.
If there was a topic that we did not discuss that you wanted to discuss, please let me know, because I tried to make sure that I put everything on the calendar or on the agenda, and so, yes, we did have to move quickly through some things, but if there was something in particular that we didn't address at all, then I didn't have it on my list, I would like to.
I think it was all there, a couple of them. I don't
Got
mean this
short- they got a
negatively,
little
but
shortchanged.
it was quick, so the balanced school year is an example we could talk some more about sometimes, but, yeah.
Yes, and it's on our, yep, so we'll keep you posted.
I just like, Mr. Gothy, you're working on the committee or whatever designation it is with the Lincoln Benefit Trust. Do we have any, I understand that a number of districts have withdrawn from that and are using some other source. Do you have any information about what other organizations and what their track records are?
Talk to the guy to your right. I've been to one meeting at Lincoln Benefit
Okay.
Trust so far, and I'm beginning to appreciate and understand what they do. Whether that is ultimately the most cost-effective way for us to proceed for providing health care, I can tell you that there have been discussions in the board in the past, and Mr. Kessler would be probably far more qualified than me to answer this, but that we have costed those things through other options. The Lincoln Benefit Trust remains, at this point, at least the most cost-effective. But, I'm not personally, engaged to one option or the other. I'm always looking for a way we can kind of chisel things and find the lowest cost. And I think that Mr. Kessler also would fall into that category. But at this point, at least with the information that I've absorbed since 2016, when I've been in here, is that is, at least at the present time, our more or less best option. But we should always be willing to look elsewhere for better efforts and not just be wed to them because of some sense of tradition or history. Ultimately, it's a marketplace.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't know, when people leave, where do they go?
Well,
and why did they leave, kind of a thing.
I'll chime in a little bit where people go and they'll go out and broker it through insurance type of things in a year-to-year basis, and your costs can be all over the place based on experience. I think one of the real benefits, as I understand it with the Benefits Trust, is the catastrophic pools that are there. If you have extremely large claims, because it's a trust, there's a pool of money that it's not all completely self-funded at that point in time. So although I think it's down to about just 20 districts in the trust right now, from about 24 2 years ago. So I think something like the
Two
number I thought I
left,
heard.
so two had exited, both for different reasons. They're both on their own. Talked with one that has a significant cost increase for this year, whether that's their own individual claims or not. They're just out with a broker on their own. They haven't gone to another consortium or trust or group or anything. So gladly share history or some other things.
this point, our meeting is, there's no executive session, everyone is free to go. This meeting is adjourned.